Estoy ciego, ciego. De noche no veo nada.
I haven't seen him in a couple of.
I know.
I would get it done. Santa Claus is coming by my house.
Okay, rolling. Let's do it.
Ready? Omer Pardillo-Cid, what an honor to have you here today.
The same, Gina. It's an honor to be interviewed by you about this great documentary.
I thank you for your time today. I know you just flew in from Mexico last night. I know you're not feeling too good and you're here with us. Thank you.
No, I'm here because of you, and I'm here because of anything that's related to Cuba. I think I always have the time to be there.
Thank you. And that's why so many in the community loved you as much as we love Celia Cruz.
Thanks.
I guess I'll start with something very simple. Where were you born in Cuba? What year were you born? When did you come to the United States?
I was born in 1972 in the middle of the island, the city of Camagüey. I left Cuba at the age of 10. My grandparents emigrated to New York in 1962. And they tried to get my father out on the early 70s. They couldn't because he was going to military academy or something. I don't even know how to say this in English, servicio militar, where you cannot leave the island.
So they got him.
They got him, so he has to go through that for probably 2-3 years. And then he came here in the late 70s. Then my mom went to medical school in Cuba and to be a dentist. And because of that, she could not leave the island. So we were stuck in the island trying to get out every year. You can think of any country that my grandfather, who was here in New York, applied for a visa, either the Chilean consulate, the Spanish consulate, the Costa Rican consulate, and my mom, the government didn't let my mom go. So finally in 1982, my grandfather, who met Castro's aunt, I really forgot her name now, wrote her a letter from New York and said, we met many years ago. I have this situation that the mother of my grandchild is in Cuba and they don't allow her to leave the island because she went to medical school. Can you do anything about it? And surprisingly enough, my grandfather, she sent, back then it was via telegram. She sent my grandfather her phone number in Cuba. So my grandfather called this lady who met with her many years ago in the 50s. And she was very kind, and she finally talked to whomever she needed to talk to in immigration in Cuba, or the medical board or whatever. So finally my mom got released to leave the island in 1982. So I left at the age of 10 alone because they told my mom that she needed to spend there another 6 months. So we were already, they didn't want me to stay another day in the island. So the Arzobispo of Camagüey, we spoke to him, and finally he got me out of the island through Panama, and then Panama, New York, where I got there. I was just 10 years old when I arrived in New York.
So you were just a little boy, 10 years old, and you had to leave the island, leaving your mother behind.
Yes.
Because the Castro regime would not allow her out just because she went to medical school there. And
yes.
Then because your father was in the age group of what happened when the revolution, and he was forced to serve on them whether he wanted to serve or not.
Right, my father left in the late 70s, I want to say 76, 77, and then he came to New York with my grandfather, and then we were stuck in the island for those 5 more years, until the situation happened that my mom got released from the Board of Medical School or something like that.
Right. 10 years old, you started in New York. Your grandfather's name?
Omer Pardillo.
Omer Pardillo. And tell me now a little bit about the Omer Pardillo-Cid that I have in front of me right now, the manager of a Cuban that is loved by so many Cubans, a Cuban that had Cuba in her heart all the time, that took our country to the world, and with the values and the morals that she was taught from that little small island. And her name was Celia Cruz. Tell me a little bit about your life. How does this young 10-year-old boy get to be the manager and the successful man that he is of Celia Cruz and now Willie Chirino?
Right. It's funny, I got to Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, New York, which is a very Italian. There was not a Hispanic community at all there, at least when I was there growing up, I got to school. I remember the first day when I went to school and non-English at all, and I was thrown in there in the school, and I'm like, oh my God, this is a whole new world. I remember the first time the doorbell rang that you needed to move classes, and I didn't know what to do because in Cuba you only have one class for the whole day. So for me that was traumatized. The doorbell, you gotta move around. But 2-3 months ahead, I started getting with the American culture, and all my friends were most likely Italians or Greeks, and my grandfather, who I owe everything that I owe in my life. He's my more than my grandfather, my father, my mentor, everything. He was he told me everything that he could told me at that moment about American culture and how to succeed in life. So I have a very great role model on my grandfather. We were living together at the time, and I think I lived with him until I was 18 years old. My family is very small. It's just my grandparents and my parents. I don't have any brothers or sisters. So just growing up in New York, then I went to high school. Then at 14 years old, I met Celia Cruz through a friend of my grandparents. Very cool lady. She was great. I mean, but I never thought that I was gonna work with her. Back in high school, when I was probably in junior year, I needed to take a class, a summer class. So I said I wanted to be an architect. So that was my goal. At the time, I was working part-time with my father, who used to own a travel agency in New York. So I was most of the travel agency business, helping the family. And I went to the record label that Celia Cruz used to be in New York, RMM Universal. And I applied as an intern for the summer. So I applied my internship there, did the whole thing. Never told Celia that I was working there, because I used to see Celia every 2-3 times a year when she was in New York. Would invite me to a concert, my grandparents, and we always used to spend Nochebuena together, because her best friend, Maria Hermida, was my grandparents' best friend. So she used to do a Nochebuena in New York. So I used to see her like once a year for Nochebuena, and then every other concert in New York that I was invited by her or whatever. So started working at the record label the whole summer. She comes in September and she sees me there and she says, what the hell are you doing here? I said, I'm working here. I said, well, you didn't tell me. I will talk to the manager and get you right in. And then Ral Mercado, who used to be her manager, saw that we knew each other. And I said, you know Celia? Yes, I know Celia. And he saw that we had kind of a connection. So he told me, if you want to work here next summer, then I was a senior in high school. Come back. I mean, I love to have somebody that Celia knows, and otro cubanito. It's like, she's the only Cuban, you'll be the only Cuban. So I'm sure you guys are gonna get together. And for me, it was just an honor. I mean, just to be next to Celia Cruz, not even thinking of working, just to be sitting next to her. So my God, it's like being next to Jose Marti for me. So I came back the next summer, and I started doing like intern thing, like copies, this, the other. Then Ralph Mercado again saw that I was very passionate about working with her. He said, you know what, I'm gonna put you to work here whenever, like part-time after school. And that's how I started. I started to being her assistant to the publicist, then assistant to her raw manager. Then years came back, and I was her raw manager. And then in 1996, she thought that company was not the right thing for her at the moment. And she talked to me and said, Omer, I was 23 years old. And she says, we were flying back from Los Angeles. And she goes, do you think that you can manage me? Because you've been traveling with me already for 4 years, and you know everybody in the business, everybody that deals with me. I want to leave Real Mercado, and you think you can handle my business? And I thought about it for 2 seconds. I said, yes, I can do it. But I was very nervous too, because I said, at 23 years old, managing a legendary singer, how do that goes? But God and gave me the strength of doing it, and I accepted. And within the week, I was just opening up an office, getting new accountants, getting a new record label, getting a whole team for Celia together. And she trusted me, and thanks God, things went very, very well until the day she died. And I have the honor today of managing her estate and her legacy for generations to come.
Yes, you did. So tell me a little bit about if she ever mentioned to you her Cuba, the Cuba of the Cubans of my parents, of our grandparents, before that, the 1959 revolution, obviously.
I think Gina Celia started in Cuba in 1950, and she lived that golden era of Cuba, where Cuba was the Paris of the Americas. Celia's Cuba was the great Tropicana years, where everybody was in Cuba just enjoying and having a great time, where Cuban bands will travel all over the world to from Paris to Buenos Aires, from Buenos Aires to Sydney. I mean, Cuban music was in the 50s was the golden era of music, and still today we live out of that music. I think when you think about Cuba, you think about two things: music and tobacco. And Celia was the reigning queen of Cuba. I always think that Celia was Cuba out of Cuba. Wherever Celia was singing, there was Cuba. When she left in 1960 to exile, Celia became the symbol of a free Cuba, the symbol of a Cuba that my grandparents, that your parents thought. I mean, every time they saw Celia on stage, they saw Cuba, because Celia represented Cuba, that era of a Cuba Republicana, our Cuba. That's what I remember. I had a very touchy experience in 2003, right before she passed. We were coming back from San Francisco, and I even get emotional when I tell the story. As we landed in San Francisco from New York, there was this lady who was 92 years old, and she saw Celia at the airport, and she goes to Celia, I'm 92 years old. I won't be able to go back to Cuba because of age. Let me touch you. Just touching you, I'm touching Cuba. And that for me was like, my God, this lady who's 92 years old telling those words to Celia means a lot. I mean, and Celia was the symbol of that nation, of a Cuba Republicana, of free Cuba. She was a flag out of Cuba in the world. Celia was not a political singer, but she represented everything. She didn't have to say anything when she got on stage. She was just Cuba. And she always told the truth about Cuba. She won't promote it, but she was asked by a journalist, what do you think about Castro? What do you think about the Cuban government today? She would say the truth. She never hid anything. And we will travel the world, from every country in Latin America that you can think. That a lot of Latin American countries, they're more pro-Castro than anything. And we will confront the press and tell them the truth. I mean, you have a point of view, but the reality of Cuba is what I'm telling you. And she was known for that. I mean, Celia represented a lot of things. She was a poor black woman who left an island and became well-known. And I think that is very important, and show you how the impact of music, because in reality it was just her voice, her music that took the Cuban music everywhere. For me, that was Celia was una bandera de nuestra cultura, more than anything. You go to Germany, anywhere you go, and you say the Celia Cruz name, and they know who she is.
Amazing. That's wonderful. That's beautiful. And I know she loved you a lot, calling you her son. And I know that she would be so proud to know that her little Omer, her son, and her manager is now the proud father of a beautiful baby boy, Anton.
Yes,
and
yes,
if she
yes.
was here, I'm sure she'd be telling the world, tengo miedo.
Right. She was just a great lady who was, the only thing that she couldn't do in life was return to Cuba. She wanted to go back. She always says, you know what, I want to get to the airport in La Habana the day that I'm able to go back, and get one of those buses, the New York, the ones that are in the top, they don't have it's like a roof, the tourist buses.
Yeah, like the one in Torreos.
Right, those type of buses, and get in there with a band and start singing from the airport to all the way to Plaza Cívica, and hoping to have everybody there waiting for me. That was a dream. And then visiting her mom's grave at the Cementerio Colón in La Habana, and that was the only thing that she couldn't do. And I know that today she's there in spirits, and hoping one day seeing a Cuba Libre and our nation back in track of what used to be when La Cuba Republicana was there.
In closing, Omer, how do you see, or in your opinion, in your feelings, do you see any esperanza, any hope for a free Cuba ever without, we won't name them, the tyrants?
Gina, I just turned 40 years old, and as I'm getting older, I hope I get to see it. And if it happens, it will take a lot of years for the Cubans to change the mentality of those 50-something years of retaliation and having no freedom at all. It will take another 20-something years for another generation to come and learn the values that we always had. We're very hardworking people. We're people dedicated. We're loyal. All those values are kind of lost for Cubans today. So I hope there'll be a new generation that brings Cubans back to what it used to be. And people like you and me and everybody who's been interviewed here who can help the new generation of Cuba. Probably for a Cuba that we won't even see. But it'll be great to know that there'll be a monument on Celia Cruz or a Jorge Mascanosa monument right along Malecón in La Habana, who were people out of Cuba who did a lot for Cubans, because there's 50 years of Cubans that's been out of Cuba that's done a lot. Just to name a few: Jorge Mascanosa, Olga Guillot, Celia Cruz, Iriana Rosletinen, Diaz Balart. There's been a lot of Cubans who've done a lot of things. And to put the Cuban...
And now
Marco Rubio. Yeah, I mean, there's been... And everywhere you go, I get to travel a lot, and anywhere you go, there is a Cuban who's done very well. I just arrived from Mexico last night. The vice president of a big Mexican corporation, the biggest Mexican corporation, is Cuban. The president of Citibank in Mexico is Cuban. So it's just, we have done very well for ourselves. And we don't have an island. We just everywhere, anywhere that we can. Imagine if we all were on an island or a country that we don't have.
Well, that's, I'm glad you put that up. Adriana Cantillo, which I had the pleasure of interviewing her, she said it perfectly well. In the 50s, Cuba was like New York.
Yes.
So imagine all that energy, all of us in Cuba today. It would be magnificent. It rebuilt instantly.
Of course.
But it's the people that is it's a different generation.
I only know the Cuba from books, the 50s Cuba from videos, books. As you know, I collect coffee table books. And there was just an elegance of everything. Cuba, I'm fascinated by the Cuba in the 50s because it's a timeless era. I mean, still today, you see those photographs and you see how elegant, how everything in Cuba was. It's like, I didn't live that era, but I'm fascinated by it. It's like, I hope we can get something close to that. I just want 10% of what our parents and grandparents lived. I wanted 10% of that for the future of Cuba. And then we'll have a great island.
Absolutely. From your mouth to God's ears. Thank you so much. It's
No,
been an honor
please.
to interview you, Omer.
Thank
you
you
for your time.
No, please, an honor.
I love you a lot.
Igual, Gina.